So how did you and I get together, Anthony? Well, I think it started personally, actually. So I was literally sitting on this sofa in my flat here in Notting Hill. And just one day, I think 2 years after I moved into the flat, I heard this just incredible music coming up from the flat below. And I thought, gosh, that's incredibly moving music. And then I discovered that you had moved into the ground floor flat beneath me. So how lucky am I?
Well, from my point of view, whenever I practice the violin somewhere unfamiliar, I'm always worried how people are going to react to listening to me practice. So it's always a unexpected delight when people say yes, more please, or open the window.
What's driven a lot of my life is the question of how can we experience change and lead change in more successful ways. I'm known for 2 very pioneering pieces of research in this field that empirically looks at success in big complex change, failure in big complex change, what really makes a difference. And the biggest thing that makes a difference is the skill of leaders. My latest book, Still Moving, is all about the leadership skills that it takes to navigate large change in today's world successfully. So I'm known for being very creative in how I actually develop leaders to become better leaders of change. And that's why Anthony and I are here today to talk about the parallels between his world of music and directing music and Still Moving, the capacity to lead major change.
I work with orchestras around the world who bring me in to work as both soloist and director. And this means that there is no actual conductor there. There's no man or woman waving a stick in front of the orchestra. I am that person, but I'm also playing. And this means that I am directing and shaping the interpretation. But I'm also, because I have a violin in my hand and I am one of the team of musicians, I'm one of the group as well. And it's something that's developed for me over the last 10 years, and I enjoy it very much because for me it brings together something I love very much, which is a kind of collaborative team approach to music making. I've long felt that the way musicians can work together as a leaderless group is something special. And when you and I first talked about leadership and about how groups of people can work together, I immediately felt that what you were saying was suddenly this great conduit for all this stuff I'd stored up for years. If only people could see how we work together. So when you started to talk to me about your work, it was a relief.
I think it's mutual, actually, because I think what I like to do in the field of leadership is to always look for adjacent disciplines that aren't just from the corporate world or the classic, managerial world, because I think leaders can learn from so many different fields. As the world around us is getting ever more disruptive and uncertain and fast changing, I think leadership now is more and more about unplanned acts of creativity rather than pre-planned linear processes. And the key thing is that the insecurity that you might feel as a leader is a very, very valuable asset that you can have to bring into your organisation. So successful leadership today, in a sense, is to be so self-aware that you can bring your vulnerability to play as well as your strength. The more that you try to be strong in today's world is too brittle, too rigid, too inflexible. So I think the analogy with the music world, or with composers, let alone leadership, is this notion of trying to actually give a place to not knowing, to give a place to feeling vulnerable, to give a place to being insecure.
Great composers and artists are not afraid at all of bringing these wildly different elements together in art. So Beethoven can be majestic and strong and powerful and radiant on the one hand, and intimate and vulnerable and human and breaking apart on the other. He can be the heaven and the stars, and he can be the man in the earth, and he brings these elements together. And as musicians performing and interpreting, we have to kind of be able to embrace these different elements within ourselves and to be comfortable with that.
The whole essence of still moving is to be before you actually do anything. So I think when leaders sit down and hear a piece of Anthony playing music or hearing you speak about how you direct music, it's a very, very powerful being-led experience.
I've always felt that the way musicians can work together at best is very beautiful and has some relevance for the outside world, but I didn't really know how I could bridge that gap, so to speak. So for me, when Deborah came along, she was like the manifestation of the possibility of that thought.
And if it can happen between you and I, Anthony, just imagine how many more light bulbs can go off in the world when people engage with the messages of still moving.